You're not lost. I need you to hear that before anything else settles in your mind. Because what you've been calling being lost is actually something very different, something quieter, heavier, and far more human. You're overloaded. You didn't wake up one day confused about who you are. You didn't suddenly forget your direction. You didn't lose your values, your intelligence, or your ability to dream. What happened instead is slower, less dramatic, and much harder to notice while it's happening. Life kept adding weight. Small responsibilities first, then expectations, then other people's needs, then pressure to stay strong, then pressure to stay silent, then pressure to keep going even when your inner voice was asking for a pause. And because you're capable, because you've always been the one who Pangaeus things, you kept accepting more. Not because you wanted to, but because you could. That's how overload begins. Not with chaos. With competence. You learned to function while tired. To smile while mentally exhausted. To say I'm fine while carrying conversations in your head that never stopped. To show up for others even when you weren't fully present for yourself anymore. And the most dangerous part, no one noticed. They saw you still working, still responding, still solving, still listening, still being reliable. So they assumed you were okay. But inside, something shifted. Not broken, just crowded. Your mind stopped having space. Your emotions stopped getting processed. Your desires stopped being heard. Your body kept moving, but your inner self started lagging behind. That's when you began to feel lost. Not because you didn't know where to go, but because you didn't know how to access yourself anymore. Think about it honestly. When was the last time you made a decision that wasn't influenced by exhaustion? When was the last time you rested without guilt? When was the last time your thoughts felt quiet instead of stacked on top of each other? Overload doesn't scream. It hums, a constant low-level pressure that follows you everywhere. Even in moments that should feel peaceful. Even when you're alone. Even when nothing is technically wrong. You sit down to relax, your mind keeps working. You try to sleep, your thoughts line up like unpaid bills. You try to focus, everything feels heavier than it should. And then, the doubt starts. What's wrong with me? Why can't I think clearly anymore? Why do I feel behind when I'm doing so much? Why do simple things feel hard now? You assume something is missing. Direction, motivation, discipline, purpose. But nothing is missing. You're carrying too much at once. Overload creates fog. Not because you're incapable, but because your system was never designed to run at this intensity without recovery. Your nervous system is tired. Your emotional bandwidth is stretched thin. Your mind hasn't been allowed to empty before it was refilled again. And instead of being told to slow down, you were told to adapt. So you adapted. You learned to push through discomfort, to ignore signals, to postpone yourself, to delay rest, to delay clarity, to delay asking, is this sustainable? And because you adapted so well, no one stopped you. Including you. Being overloaded changes how you see yourself. You start questioning decisions you used to trust. You feel disconnected from goals that once mattered. You hesitate more. You overthink more. You feel emotionally flat some days and emotionally flooded on others. And then comes the quiet fear. What if this is just who I am now? It isn't. This is not your identity. It's your capacity being You weren't meant to carry constant emotional labor, constant mental stimulation, constant responsibility, constant self-regulation without space to release it. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a dramatic life change. You don't need to find yourself. You need relief. But here's the hard truth most people never tell you. Overloaded people don't feel tired. They feel confused. Because exhaustion doesn't always show up as sleepiness. Sometimes it shows up as disconnection, from joy, from intuition, from confidence, from desire. You still care, but not freely. You still function, but not lightly. You still move, but without momentum. That's not being lost. That's being full past capacity. And when someone is overloaded long enough, even silence becomes noisy. Your mind replays things you already survived. Your body stays tense even when nothing is happening. Your heart wants rest, but doesn't know how to ask anymore. You don't need to be fixed. You need space. Space to feel without responding. Space to think without deciding. Space to exist without producing. Space to be human without being useful. But because you've been strong for so long, rest feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things feel unsafe. So you keep going. Even when you're tired, in a way sleep doesn't fix. Even when clarity feels just out of reach. Even when something inside you whispers, I need a pause. Listen carefully now. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not drifting. You are carrying unfinished emotions, delayed rest, unexpressed needs, and unacknowledged pressure all at once. Anyone would feel disoriented under that weight. And the fact that you're still standing? That doesn't mean you should keep pushing. It means you've been strong enough for long enough. In the next part, we're going to talk about what overload steals from you without you realizing it. And more importantly, how you begin to unload without falling apart. Not motivation. Not discipline. Not pressure. Understanding. Here's the part no one explains when they tell you to rest more or slow down. Overload isn't just about having too much to do. It's about having too much unresolved inside you. Things you felt but never processed. Decisions you made while tired that you never revisited. Emotions you postponed because there was no time. Boundaries you crossed for the sake of peace. Pressure you absorbed because someone had to. Over time, those things don't disappear. They stack, and eventually, they start speaking through your body. Your mood, your focus, your motivation. That's why rest alone sometimes doesn't work. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up heavy. You can take a break and still feel unsettled. You can be doing less and still feel overwhelmed. Because overload isn't just physical, it's internal congestion. Your system hasn't had a chance to empty. And here's something important you need to understand. Unloading doesn't mean collapsing. It means allowing weight to be set down gradually. Most people fear this part because they think if they stop holding everything together, everything will fall apart. But notice something. Everything has already been held together by you, which means you're not fragile, you're foundational. And foundations don't crack because weight is removed. They crack when weight is never removed. The first thing overload steals is clarity. Not intelligence. Not awareness. Clarity. You stop trusting your own decisions. You hesitate longer. You replay conversations. You feel unsure even when there's no obvious threat. That's not anxiety, it's signal saturation. Your mind is processing too many unresolved inputs at once. So clarity returns not when you think harder, but when you reduce input and allow output. That might look like silence, journaling, walking without stimulation, letting emotions exist without fixing them. Not productivity. Processing. The second thing overload steals is desire. Not ambition, desire. The quiet pull toward things that once mattered. The curiosity. The excitement. The sense of, I want this. When you're overloaded, even good things feel like effort. Because your system is in conservation mode. It's not that you don't want life. It's that life has been asking too much for too long. Desire returns when safety returns. When your body learns, it doesn't have to brace constantly. When your mind learns, it doesn't have to monitor everything. When your heart learns, it doesn't have to stay guarded. The third thing overload steals is self-compassion. You become harsher with yourself than you'd ever be with anyone else. You minimize your own pain. You tell yourself others have it worse. You push yourself past reasonable limits, and because you've survived so much, you convince yourself you should survive more. But survival isn't the same as living, and you don't need to earn gentleness by suffering. Here's where unloading actually begins quietly, not with a dramatic reset, not with quitting everything, not with reinventing your life. It begins with permission. Permission to pause without explaining. Permission to feel without judging. Permission to stop being on all the time. Permission to not have answers yet. You don't unload everything at once. You unload honestly. You start noticing what drains you, instead of pushing through it automatically. You start questioning expectations you accepted out of habit. You start asking, does this actually need to be carried by me? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you were never meant to hold that weight. You just did because you could. Another truth you need to hear. You don't need to go back to who you were before overload. That version of you was built for different conditions. You're becoming someone more aware, more intentional, more selective. That's not loss. That's evolution. Unloading doesn't make you weaker. It makes you accurate. You stop saying yes to things that cost too much. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop measuring your worth by output alone. And slowly, something changes. Your breath deepens. Your reactions slow. Your thoughts become less frantic. Your intuition gets louder. Not overnight, but steadily. And one day you realize you don't feel lost anymore. Not because everything is figured out, but because you feel present again. Present in your body. Present in your decisions. Present in your emotions. Direction returns when pressure reduces. Clarity returns when space exists. You don't need to push yourself back into alignment. Alignment happens naturally when overload is addressed. So if you're listening to this and something inside you feels seen, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're not behind. You've just been carrying more than any one person should carry alone. And the moment you start unloading gently, honestly, without shame, is the moment your life starts to feel like yours again. Not louder. Not faster. Clearer.